This is not your average settings video. I'm not just going to tell you what I'm playing on and let you go. Instead, we are taking all of these settings, turns out there's a lot of them, and explaining all the most important stuff that you need to know so that you actually understand how these settings work and what they do and can make the best, most well-informed decision for yourself. Because at the end of the day, we're all different people. What works for me might not work for you. Just a disclaimer, I currently play this game on a Series X, so this video is more focused on controller than it is mouse and keyboard. That said, there is a ton of important info in here that applies to both. My recommendation, check the play bar. I have organized the whole video in the play bar. You can click around, learn what you like, or just watch it all. I mean, I wouldn't mind if you just watched it all. Before we jump in, I've got exciting announcements. First, we are now partnered with Battle Beaver Customs. Look at this and this. Take a look at these puppies. They've been balancing on my lap this whole time. By the way, the camera image of me is flipped, so this is not like a lefty controller. This is a normal controller. Don't let that confuse you. Big shout out to Battle Beaver, though. I've been a fan of them for a long time. Obviously not going to give a full review right now, but I swear by these controllers because of their paddle design. They nailed the paddle design here. They're just very quick and responsive, and they don't take up a lot of space on the controller, so it doesn't compromise how you hold it. But I'll get into it another time. For now, if you want one, you can go to the store and type code Shyway for 10% off. I got the links in the description. I'm also doing two giveaways, two 100% off code giveaways. If you want more details, check my Twitter link in the description. It's all there. The last thing I wanted to say was just thank you guys and Happy New Year. My New Year doesn't really start till January 12th because my birthday is January 12th. I am now 30. But honestly, I couldn't be happier about it because I've spent a long time doing this and I have never seen support like I've seen in the last year. A year ago, we were celebrating 10,000 subs and now we're almost at 5 times that. So just thank you guys. You guys are incredible. How far can we go? Let's see if we can get 5 times that this year. So hit the sub button. If you guys like the content, let's get right into it. But it's just, I appreciate you guys and all the support. Okay, so we'll start with button layout, and the first thing I'll say is if you play with paddles or play claw, then you can pick whatever you want, because you can make any layout work with paddles or claw. They'll make up for any of the flaws or any of the inconveniences of your layout. But if you don't play with paddles or you don't play with claw and you don't plan to in the near future, then I recommend you take your layout and you run it through my tier list here. Basically, what I've done is taken all the actions you can perform in Halo and put them on a tier list from most important to least important. Now, this is, of course, my opinion, but essentially, the more important the action, the more easily accessible it should be for you to interact with on your controller. So, for example, if we take the default layout and put it up against this tier list, the biggest issue I have with this layout is jump and crouch being on A and B. In my list, I've got jump and crouch in the A tier because jumping and crouching is very important in, oh my God, this layout is not my layout, but it's just very important in Halo Infinite to be able to jump and crouch conveniently, especially crouch jumping. Like this right here is a crouch jump. This is a basic technique in Halo. And if I want to do this on my controller, I have to take my thumb off the right stick to hit A and then hold the B button so I can crouch jump up. This whole time, I can't aim. This is a huge inconvenience, I think, for a new player if you can't aim when you're doing something as basic as a crouch jump. In my opinion, the best button layout for Halo, and the one that I play on, is Bumper Jumper. This is also the most popular button layout for pro players. Frosty, Renegade, Bound, LUCID, they all play on it, so do many more. And there's a good reason for it. It's just a very well-balanced layout. The biggest thing, just to start, you got jump on left bumper, you got crouch on left stick. I can't tell you how convenient it is to just have access to jump and crouch on that left hand on bumper and left stick. So you have full flexibility to aim at the same time. Like hitting a jump like this, I find is so natural to do on this control scheme, and I can hit it so quickly and consistently because of this scheme. Mind you, I've also played a lot of Halo 5 and hit jumps like this in Halo 5, but I think just having that flexibility, that access is so massive. So back to the layout, it's just well balanced. You've got sprint on A, which I think is a better spot for it. You're going to have to think more about when you sprint, but it's still pretty close to your right stick. Same with equipment. It's close to that right stick on the X button, though you lose a little bit of precision maybe, but you don't always have equipment, so it's not as necessary, I think, as jumping and crouching. You've got reload on the B button, which is the farthest from the right stick and the least useful, I'd say, out of them, so it makes sense. And then Y button is far off, too, to switch weapons. Switching weapons, of course, very important in this game to cancel animations. If you want to, like, cancel your reload, you can Y. If you nade, you can Y button and then sprint instantly, so you cancel the nade animation, Y button sprint. But the cool thing about having that at the Y button on the top is it's the closest to your index finger. So if you ever do decide to claw, you can maybe like semi-claw to it pretty easily. I think Renegade is an example of a player who doesn't claw except to hit the Y button when he plays. Also, of course, switching to bumper jumper will swap your ADS from LT to right stick. I know that might not be comfortable for everyone. I think both options work pretty well, down to preference. Most people, I think, play with right stick click if you played Halo in the past, because that's just how it's been. But if you really like LT aim, you can try Hell Jumper instead, which is basically bumper jumper, but with LT aim. You've still got your jump on LB. You've got your crouch on your left stick. Melee is on right stick and then nade on right bumper. So a couple of things change, but basically just bumper jumper with LT aim. The last thing I'll add here with whatever layout you select, just don't forget to map drop weapon to a button on your controller. So I would recommend right on the D-pad. Right on the D-pad is switch equipment in campaign. You can't switch equipment in multiplayer. So it's just a blank space in multiplayer. So that's why I think it's a good spot. But dropping weapons to switch to your secondary faster and shoot faster, this is a huge meta in this game at this point. I don't know if this will be patched. I don't think it's completely broken just yet, but it's so powerful that everyone's doing it. So I recommend at the very least you map it to a button so you don't have to hold Y to drop your weapon. This way, you can just tap the D-pad, drop it quicker. In the end, like I said, you can play whatever layout you want. You don't need to make the switch, especially if you use paddles or claw. Default might be natural to you. If you're coming off of Call of Duty, coming off of Apex, it's more similar, but I do think that Halo is just a very different FPS, and if you can get the hang of bumper jumper in the long run, I think it will benefit you, especially if you add paddles on top of the experience. Like, for example, I play with all 4 of these paddles. I take all my face buttons, I map them to the bottom, and my layout, in case you're curious, I have sprint top left, equipment bottom left, switch weapons top right, and reload bottom right. I'm left-hand dominant. I use my right hand for some things, but I'm mostly left-handed. So for some reason, I find if I take all my movement options and I put it all in my left hand, so I jump, crouch, sprint, and equipment all on the left side, that just works for me in my brain. It just makes sense. But there's a variety of ways to play. We all have different theories, so I'm curious to know what you guys play, what you're working with. Let me know in the comments, and know that even some of the best players in the world, like Shotzi, for example, play on very weird control schemes. Like Shotzi plays on Southpaw with his triggers flipped. So he shoots with his left trigger, he nades with his right trigger. So there's a variety of ways to play, but hopefully this info is helpful for you. Okay, spent longer there than intended, but next we're going to run through some important movement settings, and this is applicable to both mouse and keyboard and controller. First, we've got hold to crouch. So most people have hold to crouch on. I have hold to crouch on. You can play with toggle crouch if you want. There is no disadvantage as far as like hitting mechanics. Like if you want to curb slide, you can do anything on toggle crouch that you can do on hold to crouch the same way. The only issue with toggle and why I don't typically recommend it is you just have to press crouch more, right? This in Halo, you don't spend a lot of time sitting and crouch camping. So if you are using this mechanic, you're just forced to press it twice for every time you crouch and stand, which is just inefficient in my opinion. Maybe on mouse and keyboard, it makes sense, but in general, I would say hold to crouch is the play. Maintain sprint, I keep this on. The biggest difference between maintain sprint on and off is just whether or not you still sprint when changing elevation. So if I sprint, jump, and land on a surface, or just sprint and jump and land, my sprint maintains as long as I'm still holding forward. If I fall, as long as I'm holding forward, I continue sprinting. If I melee, I even continue sprinting as long as I'm still holding forward here. No need to re-sprint. If I turn maintain sprint off, then I will have to re-sprint every time I change elevation. So if I sprint, jump, and land, I'm now no longer sprinting. When I hit the floor, I have to press sprint again. If I sprint off like a little object like this and then land on the floor, I'm no longer sprinting anymore. I have to press sprint again. So it's just inconvenient. You got to press sprint more. There's no difference in the mechanics and advanced techniques you can hit. If you have it on or off, it's exactly the same. It's just you have to press sprint more with it off. Another cool thing about maintain sprint, by the way, is that you can sprint crouch jump, and as long as you release crouch before your feet hit the floor, then you will sprint again instantly without re-sprinting. You can just hold forward the whole time. Of course, if you mistime this and you're holding crouch when you touch the floor, you're going to slide. And this is an issue I'm sure many of you have had where you've sprinted, crouch jumped to something, and then slid accidentally on the ledge above and you didn't mean to. The only real way to avoid this and keep sprinting is to time the release of your crouch before you touch that floor so you don't slide. Or you can pull back on the stick and cancel sprint. So it's kind of tough to get the hang of. And it's an issue we didn't really have in Halo 5, but if you master this, a good spot to use it is on streets. That skill jump on driveway with maintain sprint on, you can sprint hold crouch, and then let go of crouch before you hit the ledge, and you'll be able to maintain your sprint throughout that whole jump sequence. You can do it faster. Next, we've got auto clamber, and I keep this off. If you turn it on, the main difference is your clamber is dependent on player movement instead of a button press. So if I want to clamber, all I have to do is jump and hold forward into the wall, and I'll clamber up, which can be convenient because you're only pressing jump one time. The rest is just down to stick movement. You can clamber on an angle, by the way, at almost a 90-degree angle, so something convenient to know. But my issue with this is you have to be extra careful to not accidentally clamber. Like, for example, if I'm in a gunfight with somebody in this door and I get behind cover and I want to precisely crouch jump up and challenge, I got to be careful and make sure I jump straight up. Because if I hug this wall, I'm going to clamber accidentally. And at a high level, if you accidentally clamber, you're dead. So that's why I don't really like this. I don't want to ever accidentally clamber. If I turn it off, I will never accidentally clamber. But on the flip side, you have to make sure to press jump a second time in the air. So, for example, if I have it off and I want to clamber this ledge, if I press and hold jump from the floor, I won't clamber, ever. I need to make sure I press jump a second time in midair. I can either time that jump when I hit the ledge, or I can press and hold the jump in midair at any point, as long as I press jump a second time in midair. So something to keep in mind. And this is another reason why I like bumper jumper, because doing that is very easy on bumper jumper. If you don't do that and you're pressing A twice, it might be less convenient. But that's the main reason. In the end, all the jumps are exactly the same, whether or not you've got it on or off, same difference. Step jump is a pretty useful setting that not enough people are aware of. What it does is lets you step up onto low height ledges like this one. The ledge needs to be about this height or maybe a little shorter. And you have to push into the ledge and hold forward as you jump. And if you do that, you can step up. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but for a Halo game, Halo has a very floaty jump. And in a tight spot, jumping way up in the air can be kind of risky just to get on a low ledge like this. So having this convenience, kind of a big deal. Like, imagine somebody's directly below you. You can just jump and kind of re-peek them over and over. So there's a little skill gap here. A couple things to keep in mind. It kind of works like clambering in that you need to be facing the ledge for it to work. So you can do it on like a diagonal like this or straight forward, but you can't do it backwards. So it's just not going to work if you try to jump backwards. What's also cool is you can do it at a crouch too. So I could be holding crouch and then step jump up to this ledge in crouch position. So kind of convenient for a challenge. On top of that, pretty convenient for map movement and setting up curb slides as well. If you happen to be in a gunfight and you're already sitting here, it's much faster to step jump up and then hit the slide to rotate through rather than jumping, like moon jumping in the air and waiting to land, right? It's going to take a lot longer to wait to land and then do your slide. So there's little optimizations in map movement here. Here's another spot where you can do it twice. Step jump once and twice to get up here. Hold crouch as well for like a safer kind of challenge. And then once you're up here, you can slide through as well. Just keep in mind that you will have to memorize your approach to some of these ledges because they're not all the same. Like this one, for example, it appears easy to step up here, but if I try to do it in the right corner, it just doesn't work for some reason. And I'm not sure why. It only really works from the midpoint of this ledge or on the left-hand side of it, whereas this one, I can hug the right corner and step up no problem. So there's little inconsistencies to keep in mind, but if you can do that, I think there's a lot of potential to optimize your map movement with something like this in certain situations. So I'm going to show you a couple examples. There's way more, but I recommend you turn it on. I don't see any disadvantage to having it off, so try it out. Okay, now we're going to cover sensitivity, acceleration, dead zones, all of this. I know this is a hot topic. Let me start by saying there is no sensitivity that's going to suddenly make you cracked on the sticks. Doesn't work like that, okay? You got to put the grind time in. Q's epic training montage. I will do my best to explain this, though, so you can make a good decision for yourself. But just starting with acceleration, I'm still kind of figuring out what some of this stuff means. But acceleration, essentially, the higher it is, the faster your reticle will accelerate from the base speed. So in this case, I'm at 5 horizontal. So the faster it'll accelerate from 5 to what I believe is the max possible speed. Because if I spin in this circle, and I'm sorry if you get nauseous, my bad. If I spin in this circle on 5, eventually I hit the max possible speed, and I think that max speed is the same if I hold 10 cents and spin? It's hard to tell, but it feels like it's about the same speed. So I think that's what acceleration is doing, is accelerating your reticle from the base speed to the fastest speed possible. And the higher the setting, the faster that acceleration will occur. Now, to find the best sensitivity that works for you, it's going to be different for everyone, of course. The best recommendation I can give is one that you probably heard before. Look at what the pros are doing. And this document, I think, will help you a lot. What this is this is on competitive Halo Reddit. This is a list of 29 pro amateur controller settings, sensitivities, and dead zones, and it's continuously being updated. So shout out to Breakshot, I guess, who has this list. This list, the link, oh my, what the heck? The link to this list will be in the description of this video, so you can look at it in your own time, but it compiles all the settings right here. What I recommend you do is just look for patterns and use that to ballpark where you put your sensitivity. So for example, this is Excel, horizontal, and vertical. We'll ignore the dead zones and the FOV for now, but what I noticed is there is no one with a horizontal lower than 3. The only person who has 3 is Stress, and he's an outlier here. I'd say most pros have a horizontal within 4, 5, or 6. I don't see anyone who has it above. Tylenol has 8.5, which is the highest that I see here. So you probably don't want to go higher than that. You can try it, but in general, 4, 5, and 6 is the general range where you see a lot of pros play for horizontal. For vertical, it tends to be either the same number or higher, because vertical in this game does feel a little bit slower, I find, than horizontal. It doesn't feel 1-to-1. So some pros put it higher, like 4, 4, 5 out of Falcated, or you can keep it the same, or 6.5, just a half point higher for Lucid, right? So this is generally what I would do to ballpark where you put your sensitivity. For Excel, I don't see anyone with an Excel lower than 2. Most of them have it between 3 to 5. So high Excel seems to be the pattern with pro players in this game. And once again, I would just follow the pattern and try it yourself. For FOV, there's a clear pattern here as well, and that's that most pros tend to play around 100 or on 100 on the dot. You got Stellar on 100, Penguin 97. If you go down, though, you've got Sab 100, Trippy 100, 100, 100, right? So there's a clear pattern. They tend to play around 95 to 105 is where pros tend to land. I'm on 102 personally. I just like the number 12, so I picked 102. You can go higher. I think Bound plays on 120. The reason why I think most pros don't do it, though, is the higher the FOV, the more the image pans out, and the farther your enemies will appear. So you might have to squint to really see things at a long distance or get real close. And the higher your FOV, the higher your sensitivity will have to be as well to compensate. And that might be like Tylenol he's on 102. So maybe this dude's just cracked. I don't know. He's 8.5, 8.5. Now, the dead zones look a little more random. For some pros, it looks like they kind of just set it and forget it. Other pros seem to have their dead zones aligned with a theory that I have for dead zones. So what I'm going to do is just explain all 3 of these dead zones the best I can for you. First, the center dead zone. The best way I can describe this is to look at a controller at a bird's eye view, and then within the control stick, draw a tiny little circle. That little circle is your dead zone. Of course, the size of it probably isn't to scale, but any control stick movement within that little circle will not register as an input on your controller. Only if your stick moves outside the circle will it register an input. So the larger you increase that dead zone number, the larger the dead zone circle, that dead space, is going to get, and the more you're going to have to move your stick to leave that dead zone and have an input register. The smaller the number, the less you got to move your stick. Ideally, you want to lower this dead zone number as much as possible so that when you move your control stick, you get the fastest feedback, the fastest response. But if you lower it too much, your control stick might start drifting. So the idea is to lower it until it starts drifting, and if it happens, then just raise it 1 notch up. The input threshold, and we'll come back to the game, sets how far your thumbstick is from the edge before a maximum input registers. So once again, top down with the controller, this time the circle would be a border around the edge of the control stick. When you move the control stick, once it hits that border, a maximum input for that stick registers. So if you take that value, that number, and you increase it, the border is going to get larger, meaning that you will have to move your control stick less before a maximum input registers. The cool thing about this setting is it's sort of like a second acceleration. You'll notice that most pros have it very high, especially on movement, like Lucid here, 15, 12 on Spartan. The reason it's so high is if you have a large threshold, when you move that stick, it's going to hit max speed faster. So when you think of strafing in Halo Infinite, if you want a really fast strafe, you'd want a high threshold, right? You put it at 15, you're going to hit that max strafe speed way earlier with less stick movement. So I personally have it on 15 for threshold. I'm not really sure why you would have it lower. Like maybe you could argue that you'd have less control because you speed up too fast, but I haven't had that issue. For your right stick though, up to you. Once again, the pros tend to have it at a higher value. The higher the number is, the faster your sense is going to feel. The lower it is, the slower it'll feel. Basically, this setting is designed to counteract slow turns. So if you max it out, you're basically never going to turn slowly. It's going to ensure that you hit that max speed earlier. Last, we've got Axial Deadzone. And this one I found kind of confusing and redundant. It says set how far your thumbstick is from the X or Y axis before a minimum input registers, which if we go back to the top down, that's basically the same as the center Deadzone, but only when you're moving on the X or Y axis. So only if you're moving horizontal or vertical strictly. But the center Deadzone also includes the X or Y axis. So they're kind of overlapping with each other. So my theory on this and what I've done is I just took my center Deadzone and I brought it all the way down to 0. And then I adjust my axial Deadzone as low as it can go until the drift hits, basically. And then once it hits, I raise it 1 up. Basically, because my objective is to get the fastest possible response, and because these Deadzones like overlap with each other, this seemed to kind of work out for me. And I noticed some pros have this strategy, like LUCID is doing the same thing. He put both of his down to 0, and then I'm assuming his axial on 3.5 and 1.5 is the lowest that he can get it before the drift starts occurring. So I do think that LUCID has this same kind of idea, and Trippy has it as well, but his is wild. He's on 0 and 0, so he's got a perfect left stick, basically. He can like just zero it out. He has no drift whatsoever. Not many people have sticks that are perfect to the point where you can zero out both sides and get no drift. I guarantee you're going to get some kind of drift at a level. Just find the one that works for you. In the end, we're all going to have different settings, but hopefully this helps you understand it all. By the way, if you're on mouse and keyboard, thankfully this whole sensitivity process is a lot more simple, but it's also just not my wheelhouse. So what I'm going to do is link you to 2 different creators, Active and Gigs. I know these guys well. They've been playing Halo Infinite since before it even came out. They got plenty of experience and knowledge with mouse and keyboard and settings, so their content is in the description. Feel free to check them out. At this point, if you're still with me, we are in very long video territory. This is uncharted waters, okay? So I'm going to try to speed run through the rest of this, give you all the important info you need to know, starting with graphics. And for Series X, it's very limited. If you have the option to change this, make it performance so you can play on 120 FPS. Right now, I'm stuck. I'm capped at 60, so I can't change it. I've got blur, screen shake down. I don't think changing this stuff has any drastic effect on what you see on screen, but I would say get rid of screen shake because last thing you want is your screen to shake with a melee. But for the most part, I keep this pretty generic. When it comes to graphics on PC, there's a lot more detail there. Of course, I can't see this. The best recommendation, check the pros once again. LUCID, I think, is a good option. I'm going to put links for LUCID in the description as well so you can see his graphics and all those details. For UI, make sure to check network statistics so you can see your ping and then headcase about it in all your multiplayer games. For color, honestly, it doesn't matter. Just don't make it the same color. Everybody's got different colors for enemies and friendly, whatever you like. I'm on aubergine and cerulean, whatever that is. And then enemy names gives you more visual feedback when you're shooting an enemy, so I say turn that on. The other ones don't really matter. This stuff I don't think matters. What matters most about UI is the weapon offsets. This one actually kind of valuable. This is also your preference. I'm at -70, -70, +70 for the BR. The idea behind this is to just get rid of your blind spot on the side of the screen and make the weapon as small as possible. It's more effective for big weapons like the skewer or the rockets. You can set your offsets for different weapon types. For heavy, I've got -100, -100, and 0. And what that does is makes the rockets look like this. They're a little bit smaller. I'll have a comparison to what it usually is, but a small difference. You get a little bit more on screen that you can see. Minor advantage. The last thing I'm going to touch on in this video under accessibility is text size. Some of you might have been wondering why the text is so large in this video, and that's because I've set it to extra large. If I put it back to default, it's a lot smaller. The text in this game by default is pretty small. The cool thing about making it larger is it doesn't just affect the menus. It changes everything. The size of my weapon in the corner, the size of the radar, the size of the kill feed. If I kill him, the kill feed is a lot bigger now, which is kind of useful. Now I can see who's dead and who's coming back on spawn without really moving my eyes too much, basically. Also, objective markers are all larger on screen because of this. So it's very minor, but it might benefit you to turn it on, so give it a try. That's it. That is my ultimate settings guide for Halo Infinite. You now know everything that I know about settings. And if there's anything I don't know, then I encourage you guys to let me know in the comments. If there's any valuable info that I missed here, especially in regards to PC, mouse, and keyboard, feel free to let me know in the comments. I will heart those comments so they get more visibility, but hopefully this discussion was helpful and beneficial for you. Once again, thank you guys for sticking with me. I figured I'd kick off the year with something a little more introductory and approachable for everyone. Ideally, if you ever have settings questions, this video should answer them, and hopefully it continues to do so in the foreseeable future. Either way, if you guys like the video, you know what to do. Hit like, hit the sub button, check out related videos. We got a lot more coming up. For now, I'll see you in the next one.